We need to be clear about this. The decision to cut the tie linking money to the gold scarcity should have freed the people. In fact, the result is quite the opposite. With the slow turn of the screw, a new system of slavery of money to the happy few is being applied. We are only now feeling the effects because we believe that this could only happen to poor countries. So, where's the catch? When we abandon the materiality of money, the two systems which depend directly on it, the dual currency system and the fractional reserve system, should have been abandoned too. They weren't, however, and here are the consequences. The real money, which now replaces gold, although only real by general consensus, is central bank money which can only be issued by national central banks. By maintaining the principle of a fractional reserve, however, we have ensured that the quantity of real money available remains permanently below requirements, some 8 to 15 times less than needed to be precise. Given the intrinsic insufficiency of central bank money, a substitute has to be found from private resources. The bank scriptural currency, which has no official legal value, and which we have referred to above as money of common use. Remember, it's called money, it looks like money, and it works like money, but it is not money. It's just a promise to supply central bank currency on demand. But where does this bank currency come from? It can't be panned in the rivers anymore or mined from the face of the rock. If more money is needed in society, it has to be created. But how? By contracting debts to banks who behave as though they were lending us something they own. The money creation process can be described as a simple but magical accounting operation which transforms into money something that isn't. As the economist John Kenneth Galbraith put it, the process by which banks create money is so simple the mind is repaired. Let's take an example. Meet Mr. Smith. He needs $10,000 to buy a car. His bankers examine his credential and decides he has the means to reimburse the sum together with the interest. He grants him the loan. He then enters $10,000 on the asset side of the bank's balance sheet, as he has the authority to convert the promise Mr. Smith made in the loan agreement into money. At the same time, he enters a liability of $10,000 in the bank's account, the sum the bank owes to Mr. Smith. In fact, it's a simple exchange of debts, one payable immediately and in totality by the bank so that Mr. Smith has money in his account, another to be paid back to the bank by Mr. Smith under the terms of the loan agreement. So far, there's no problem for the bank. A basic accounting operation has allowed $10,000 to be whisked out of a controller's hat. Mr. Smith next signs a check to his garage, which happens to use the same bank. Still no problem for the bank. It debits the Smith account and credits the garage account. Just another bit of bookkeeping. In reality, the only thing deposited in the Mr. Smith account and subsequently transferred to the garage account was not dollars, but an empty bag. At this point, however, the garage needs to pay a supplier's bill to an account in a different bank. Things suddenly get complicated for Mr. Smith and the garage bank. Why? Because the supplier's bank isn't interested in empty bags. It wants central bank money in the bags. Every day, you see, banks determine what they owe each other, and any debit balances are settled in central bank money. If a bank lacks the central bank money it needs on its account to pay what it owes, its only option is to borrow from other banks or from the central bank itself. You'd have realized by now, however, that the bank is mainly interested in avoiding having to pay in central bank money, which is far more costly than the empty bags it can use for free.
Maintenant,
let's try now to get a view of the whole dynamic by way of an analogy. Imagine the world as a bathtub, and imagine the money issued by the central bank as the water in the tub. The level of the water in the tub, however, is too low to meet everyone's need. In response, the private banks open up the credit tap to meet the demand, letting what is supposed to be water but isn't flow into the borrower's tank, which are the accounts. In reality, the banks merely draw a line on the side of each tank showing the amount of water they are committed to providing, leaving everyone with the illusion that the water is really there. As the bank know that it would take extraordinary happenings to make everyone want to draw their ration of water at the same time, they can afford to take the risk. What really counts is that all the water needed seems to be in the tanks, and that people believe that this is really the case. Don't forget, however, that all this theoretical water is out on loan. It therefore pours out of the tub, and what's more is subject to interest. This means that every day on the payment deadline, some of the water goes down the plug hole, and each borrower has to reimburse more than he or she actually borrowed, which means that the amount to be returned is always more than what was originally provided. What are the consequences? Let's be absolutely clear. Money equals debt. All the money currently in circulation is linked to one or another debt. No debt, no money. If all the debts were suddenly repaid, not only would there be no money left in the world, but would still be owing. Whether we like it or not, this means that we are all in conflict with each other. The money required to pay the interest on the loans was not included in the original loan. To pay off the interest, every borrower has to take the money from somebody else's pocket, and everyone else, of course, has the same problem. It creates a state of high tension, like in a game of musical chairs. The losers go bankrupt, losing all they own. If there were no means to compensate, society as a whole would be getting poorer and poorer, with a small minority getting richer and richer until the tub ran dry. Today, however, as the current crisis shows, the compensation mechanism is grinding to a halt. So, what is this mechanism that prevents the bathtub from running dry? Exponential indebtedness. Keep on borrowing. By opening up the tap even further, i.e. by stimulating the demand for credit, we manage to meet the extra demand at the plug hole and keep some water in the tub. The result, inevitably, is over-indebtedness and population in bondage. It is what we are now seeing. Public and private debt levels are currently so high that lenders are beginning to think they won't get paid. To reduce the public debt and, as they say, reassure the markets, ordinary citizens, already prey to soaring by bank charges, are being asked to pay higher taxes and to suffer measures of hardship which degrade their social services and dismantle the system of social welfare. Debt is not the result of people living beyond their means, as it is often claimed to justify the painful measures being imposed. Debt is the result of the dynamic driving the system as a whole. How could there not be debt if debt is the condition for money to exist? But it's so much easier and profitable for those reaping the benefits to blame the folk in the street, rather than admit that if money is an IOU by nature, it is an IOU from the community to its members, and not an IOU from the community to the banks.
Basically, private banks create money. There are commercial banks for the public and business banks for industry. They get to decide when to manufacture money. That's an enormous power given to private entities. Money is the blood of the economy. It's the people's right to livelihoods. The fact that the very creation of money is monopolized by private entities means that people's lives are monopolized by private entities. Because tomorrow I can decide to put faith, let's say, into oil companies or companies that produce anti-personnel mines or whatever it may be. And these decisions are made by maybe 100 bankers in New York or 20 in France, maybe fewer, 10 people.
Seen from a personal point of view, this is not the most obvious statement. You may quite likely be saying you don't owe anybody anything. But the situation has to be seen in its globality. And it is that globality that we're trying to explain. It's society that has borrowed all the money. You, personally, may not have borrowed any money, but all the money you have was borrowed at some point in time by somebody somewhere. You might be asking yourself, why do our government persist on following a path so risky and so consistently imperfect? Well, you see, what some of us experience as errors or dysfunctions guarantees others fortune and privileges. It all depends on where you really stand. World finance is dominated on one hand by the City of London, state within a state governed solely by private banks, and on the other by Wall Street in the United States of America, where central bank, also known as the Federal Reserve, is not a public organization, but a cartel of private banks. Admittedly, the Bank of France is state-run, as is the Bank of Canada. As for the Central European Bank, it belongs to the member state. And yet, to tighten things up to notch, bankers have obtained the right to make the central bank independent from political power, which in turn render them entirely dependent on private bank. You'll note that whereas independence of central bank has been claimed as a necessary bolt under the cover of healthy management, the dependence on banking interests is never mentioned. Their independence in respect to political power is far from neutral, as it places the financial power above political power, and the latest submission is clear for all to see today. Should you still have doubts, here's an excerpt from an article published on the website of the newspaper Le Monde on the 2nd January 2012, entitled, "Why do States Pay 600 times more than banks?"
An American judge recently agreed with Bloomberg journalists whom had asked their central bank to be more transparent in regards to the aid it had poured to help sustain the banking system. After having peeled through 20,000 pages of various data, Bloomberg pointed out that the Federal Reserve had secretly lent banks that were struggling the sum of $1,200 billion at the incredible low rate of 0.01%. Simultaneously, the inhabitants of numerous countries are suffering from austerity plans imposed by their governments because financial markets won't accept to loan them a few billion at interest rates lower than 6, 7, or 9%.
Double standards, you see. When banks are having trouble, they benefit from generosity at the best rates, but in the case of states, they pay full rate. With things as they are, it's not surprising that from an ordinary citizen's point of view, the system is dysfunctional. Yet, if you see this from a bank shareholder's point of view, then it's the most effective system, as you can only win. All is good, profits go to the bank, things aren't well, the losses are for the people. Heads I win, tails you lose.